It's the real news. I'm Ben Norton. Turkey's increasingly authoritarian President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has ramped up the violent repression of Kurds and leftists, not just inside his country, but abroad as well. Erdogan visited Washington, D.C. in May 2017 to meet with Donald Trump. In response, left wing and pro Kurdish activists in the United States organized a protest outside the Turkish embassy. These protesters were then physically attacked by members of the Turkish leader's security team. 9 activists were hospitalized, some with serious injuries. Shocking video of the assault went viral on social media. Well, nearly 1 year later, the US government has dropped the charges against the majority of the Turkish agents accused of carrying out the attack. Federal prosecutors dismissed all charges against 11 of the 15 bodyguards who were suspected of partaking in the assault. Coincidentally, these charges were dropped just one day before former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson met with Erdogan in the Turkish capital Ankara. U.S. officials claim the charges were not dropped for political reasons, but critics are skeptical. These charges are also being dismissed at a time, right now, when NATO member Turkey is carrying out an illegal invasion of northern Syria. The Turkish military is fighting an alliance with extremist Islamists, including alleged former members of ISIS and Salafi rebels in the Free Syrian Army. These Turkish-backed forces have killed hundreds of mostly Kurdish civilians and burnt down and looted Kurdish homes. To discuss this scandal, we are joined by Mehmet Tankan. Mehmet is a Kurdish activist from Turkey who was one of the protesters attacked by Erdogan supporters in D.C. He's involved with the American Kurdish Association. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, Mehmet, you were at the protest in Washington, D.C. last year when you all were attacked by Erdogan supporters. Can you speak a little bit about what happened?
Yes, I was there too. Some of our friends, we were there too. We were just chatting and then saying, do our protest against Erdogan, to ask United States to stop Erdogan, to what he's doing to Kurds in Turkey, in Syria. There was a peaceful protest because honestly, had sunglasses and I was feeling really just different, nice. And then that attack didn't happen, and then they kicking us, beating us, kids. There were 2 kids too, and then there were elderly people, and some the women too. They didn't care about kids or elderly or women or anyone. They just attacked just one time as a kind of forces to attack some people. They attacked us and then beat us and kicked us, and then we almost 11 of us hospital. We went to hospital for that stuff.
Mehmet, can you speak about why you all were protesting outside the Turkish embassy?
Yes, I'm a Kurd from the Turkey. We always been like for Turkish government. Others, we never had like our rights to be as a Kurds live in Turkey. And there was a Erdogan before he jailed hundreds Kurdish politicians from the HDP, and he destroyed 11 cities of the Kurdish cities in Turkey, southeast, and he killed hundreds people in the Turkish forces. Killed hundreds people in southeast Turkey. And then we were protesting to him why someone has to stop this guy, stop the killing Kurds. And then he turned back he was started killing the Kurds in Afrin too. He was preparing to Rojava. That's why we were asking hey, we need to stop this guy, stop the killing Kurds. And the other thing were like he was against the Kurdish referendum in South Kurdistan too, which is part of Iraq. And we was, as a Kurds, I want to say Erdogan has to stop. It's just not Kurds in Turkey has a problem. Other Democrat, other activists, or academician, they have all problem. He put a lot of people in jail, unemployed, many thousands of them. We were just there to chatting them, our like a first amendment, say hey, Erdogan has to stop. He must be stopped. That was how we were there. That was our reason.
And then the U.S. government claims that the reason it dropped these charges was because there supposedly wasn't enough evidence, even though there's a lot of video footage of this attack. The U.S. claims that it did not drop the charges against these Turkish agents for political reasons. Do you buy that argument? Do you think that this is actually apolitical?
I cannot say about the politics stuff because I don't know how much is it, but I can say about the, enough evidence. There's a lot of videos, photos, a lot of things about that, and there's a lot of article about that stuff. What happened? Almost 1 month it was in media, and they were showing what they did to us. It was everything is clear for evidence, and even the John McCain, he said that time he said everything is clear. We don't need another evidence to charge them. That's for evidence, and for I think everything is enough.
And then you also moved to the United States about 6 years ago, you said, and before that you had been living in Turkey. In these past several years, things have always been bad for Kurds, for minority groups, and for the left. There's been a lot of repression for many years in Turkey, but specifically in the past few years, we've seen a massive increase in the repression. Erdogan, after a failed alleged coup in 2016, Erdogan purged hundreds of thousands of people from the government. He's imprisoned, tens of thousands of people, and the political forces, particularly pro-Kurdish forces, have endured the brunt of this, particularly the HDP. Can you speak about the situation inside Turkey and the repression faced by Kurds and by the left?
I studied in Turkey. I studied in Ankara. And that time was studying was like a kind of problem too. Always there have been problem with Kurds, and for some Democrat and leftists, there was always problem for them. But after 2013, there was a kind of peace process. That time is couple years was okay, was good. Even when I was in my family, they were okay. But after coup, just he turned this coup against the Kurds and other leftists and Democrat in Turkey, and the people who wants to peace. He used this coup against them, is not against the other people. That's why the Turkey is every day getting worse. They're now getting worse. I don't know what's going to be for Turkey, but the Turkey is getting really far away from the west too, and the Turkey is really became close to the Middle East countries, because before that Turkey was like between Middle East countries and Europe, but now Turkey just turned back to the Middle East and then kind of became to radical Islam. It's just kind of really hard for people who lives there now. It kind of became to dictator. I cannot say 100%, but every day is getting worse. If you read it and watch the TV, what's going on, and then the all media is working for Erdogan, and everything is just now belonging to Erdogan in Turkey. He thinks that he's a Turkey.
Yeah, and of course, we've seen that many prominent journalists have been imprisoned. In fact, journalists who reported on Turkey's policy in Syria, which we'll get to in a moment, specifically reporting on Turkey's arming of extremist Islamists in Syria, have been imprisoned for doing that reporting work. But I'm also interested, you mentioned that there's been a rise of Islamism inside Turkey. This is a country that, going back to Ataturk, has a very secular modern history in the post-Ottoman period. What's interesting about this to me is, Erdogan, his party, the AKP, is linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, and clearly he has been incorporating Islamism into politics, but it seems to me that he also has support from Kemalists, some Kemalists who are largely secular, and even, far-right fascistic forces like the Grey Wolves and these other extremely nationalist militias. Why do you think these right-wing, sometimes secular forces have allied behind Erdogan? How has he been able to create such widespread support among some of these nationalist groups?
Yeah, I think it's when it became the Kurds, the nationalists, and just kind of, I cannot say the leftists, but the Kemalists, they became the same point. They came the same point against the Kurds. They don't want a Kurds. They have their own, and they don't have any freedom. When they became the Kurds, they came together. That's all their point. The other way, they don't like each other. But when the point come to Kurds, that's why they became together and then just destroyed whatever the Kurds has it.
And then can you talk about what is the state of the People's Democratic Party, the HDP? I know 2 years ago there was shocking video on social media of the co-chair of the HDP having her door broken down and being arrested by Turkish forces, and many members of parliament who had been elected representatives from the HDP are now in prison. Do you know what the state is of the party today?
Now the party is really just kind of struggling now because the Demirtas and Figen Yüksekdağ, they jailed two co-chair, and now many of the parliament too, they're in jail, and thousands of people of their member, they're now in jail too, and there is a hard really for HDP, but still they are doing some. They're asking for democracy, they're asking for their right, but it's really hard for them to work in Turkey because the Erdogan new partner is really dangerous, I think, because the MHP, this is Grey Wolves, they are nationalists, and the Erdogan now is with them. Before Erdogan was just by himself, and then he had a different partner, but now his partner, they are really dangerous, the MHP. That's why I don't know how Turkey is gonna back to democracy or some other way, but now it's really hard for other people to live in Turkey. And even now he bought all like the biggest media in Turkey too. Some people bought that media too. The mean is everything is going to be controlled by Erdogan.
And then finally, let's move a little bit toward Turkey's foreign policy. We saw that in January, Turkey invaded northern Syria and began launching an attack on Afrin, which is a Kurdish majority area. In fact, it's estimated that about 90% of the population was Kurdish. The UN has said that 2/3 of the population in Afrin had fled in this Turkish assault, which is being waged by the Turkish military in alliance with rebels, Islamist rebels from the Free Syrian Army, along with other extremists. Can you speak about what happened in Afrin? I mean, we've seen some horrifying videos on social media and photos of Salafi rebels burning down Kurdish homes, looting Kurdish businesses. What do you think is going on in northern Syria, and what is Turkey's role there?
The Turkey always the calling Kurds, whatever the Kurds asking for politic, like a status, they are calling to them terrorists, but they don't care. They just always put a different name. I just want to go a little bit back. In the 11th city of Turkey, the Kurdish city, he destroyed with same forces, and the same forces were against the Kurdish referendum in Iraq too. They were ready to attack in front of the border of the Iraq. They were ready to attack to the same forces, but now same forces destroyed the Afrin too, and they took over the Afrin, and then hundreds thousands Kurdish people, they left their home, their everything to now they're living in streets, they living in kind of desert. They don't have nothing. They don't have nothing. Some of them they sleep in his car and the truck, and they really need his help. Erdogan and he's like a partner now. They don't care about the Kurds where they live and what they are asking, but they just care about if the Kurds asking for some politic status, they will destroy it. They don't care. They are saying even they're worse. They say even the Kurds go and some island in Brazil, if they have their own, they will destroy that too. That's why it's all about the Kurds. They care. They are against that. It's not about some parties or YPG or YPJ. Erdogan, they care about the Kurds, but they have something, they will destroy it.
And then, of course, Turkey claims that the YPG is a so-called terrorist organization, and Turkey claims that its assault in northern Syria is an anti-terror operation. What do you say to that?
The Turkey, whenever the Kurds asking something, they are terrorists. Even us, when we protesting him in America, he's calling us terrorists too. He's calling some American terrorists too. He sometimes he's called everyone. Whatever he doesn't like, he called them terrorists too. But he's not. Now he's not calling the Kemalists in Turkey terrorists. If the Kemalists really go against him, he will call them terrorists too. It's not just he just called them. They don't care about the YPG. YPG never attacked in Turkey. They cannot prove anything. The YPG never attacked any different country. They just try to defend their people against the Islamic State, ISIS terrorist group. They didn't attack. They didn't do anything with Turkey. They were always ready to make a deal with Turkey. They're asking Turkey to just make a peace, and because they are neighbor, they need to be with Turkey to good. But Turkey never accept that. They just attacked the Afrin. Now they are try to attack the Shingal, or they try to Sinjar. They try to attack the Manbij too. It's just Turkey is about the Kurds where if they are asking something. It's easy to call them terrorists for Turkey.
Yeah, and you're referencing that now Erdogan has threatened to launch an attack on Sinjar in Iraq, and of course, there are also um, suspicions that he will next invade Manbij in northeastern Syria. For viewers, if you want to see the coverage of that we'll be doing in the future, please go to therealnews.com and keep track of the coverage we're doing. Mehmet Tankan, thank you so much for joining us and speaking about your experience.
I just want to add something about our case because, I moved this country. I want to feel safe. I don't want to feel unsafe. This Erdogan, if he can do here that much to us, if it's nothing to happen to his guards, that means he can do more. The next time when he comes to here, he would. They don't care about. They would kill someone too easily because this is not his the first time he's doing that stuff in foreign. That's why I just want to leave. Want to feel safe. There's a lot of evidence, videos show how they attacked us peaceful protesters, and I wanna justice for against those people. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course, this was actually the second attack on protesters by Turkish agents. So, thank you so much for speaking about your experience, Mehmet, and thanks for sharing your story on the Real News.
Thank you.
And I'm Ben Norton. You're watching the Real News.